Hey guys, how's it going? Michael Uzi, welcome.
Hey, Aman. It's going well. How's it going with you?
Going well, going well.
I got new
I'm just cooking.
headphones. Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, nice. What did you get?
I also got my wisdom teeth pulled. I'm a big
Oh
boy
wow.
now.
How old are you? Wait, hold on. Who's talking right now? Oh, that's
Obi.
Uzi. Okay, I got you. Yeah, yeah.
I'm
Obi,
23.
Uzi, Obi. Yeah, I thought Michael was talking. I'm like, wait, what?
We
I
both
forget
were.
how old. Yeah.
I think I
Right
got
side.
my wisdom teeth removed like 10 years ago.
I was gonna say. Yeah, Michael, I saw your thread just before I joined. I didn't get a chance to read it. Do you want to pin it up here so we can talk about it?
Sure, give me a second. I'll pin it.
Yeah. I was reading more about the proxy advisors and kind of the impact they may have. That's why I'm a little more concerned now than before. I was hoping one of these proxy advisors to kind of say, this is for services already provided. So go ahead and vote for it, but that didn't happen. Obi?
I mean, I saw Dan Ives on Schwab Networks saying the comp package will pass. This was Friday. So I don't know if that's reassuring, but Dan is an Uber bull. He does seem to understand the business well. I could put the clip in comments.
Well, why don't you summarize it for us? What did he say? Why does he think it's going to pass?
I'm pretty sure he just said outright, I think it's going to pass. Not because he was being rushed. So he gave like a price target. China is going to uptick second half the year. And then 88 is like an 11-10 of importance.
Well, let's focus on proposal 4 for a little bit. So you're saying he said, why don't you just listen to it exactly what he said? Because if he said, I think it's going to pass, is different from it's going to pass. The first one is more like lower confidence kind of statement. Sammy, what do you think?
I was wondering if you thought Elon was going to vote his shares on Proposal 4, because
he can't vote, right?
Oh, I didn't know that he couldn't. I knew that he abstained from voting last time. I didn't know that he wasn't allowed to.
Yeah, I think he's going to abstain this time too. I thought they said that in the I think we already know that, but like this is basically a like this. If this vote passes, it strengthens the appeal process. If he votes for it, and that's the only reason it passed, it does nothing to strengthen the appeal process. So it doesn't make sense for him to vote. So, Michael, do you want to tell us about your thread?
Yeah, sure. So after doing some research, I kind of decided, okay, well, we have enough information to start to speculate with some database scenarios. So in my base case, which is what I think is most likely, I made some assumptions. I assume that the passive funds all vote and they all vote against Elon's compensation package out of interest for their compliance. Basically, they want to just perform the same as the S&P fund, and they don't give a crap about the companies that they invest in. Really, they actually just care about matching the performance, and so they don't want to be sued. They want to be compliant. So if ISS and Glass Lewis, the top two proxy advisors who recommended against, they will probably vote against. So that's the first assumption. The second assumption is assuming high turnout for other institutional investors, and they're broadly supportive, but less so than in 2018. And the third assumption is that retail shareholders have somewhat high turnout and are broadly positive, but less so than in 2018. And with these assumptions, we get that Elon's compensation plan passes with a razor-thin margin of 50.1%. And you could see that in the first screenshot in the pinned post.
Yeah.
And then I experimented.
That's my, before we move on to the next one, that's my base expectation as well. All the assumptions that you named, which are passive funds vote with ISS and Glass-Lewis recommendation because they're more concerned about being compliant and tracking index rather than Tesla having a good leadership or outperforming, underperforming. That is none of their concern. And you said ISS and Glass-Lewis are the two top proxy advisor firms. I think that's an underestimate because my understanding is that they have 90% of the business together. So it's like a duopoly.
97.
Yeah, there you go, 97%. So, and then you said institutional investors are broadly supportive, but not as much as 2018. And retail investors, somewhat high turnout, broadly supportive, but not as much as 2018. The one thing I agree with all those assumptions as base case. And then the one thing I would add is I hear a lot of people say Glass-Lewis and ISS recommended against in 2018 too. Why would it be different this time? Like, why would the result be different this time? The difference is there were no passive funds in 2018 in Tesla. Today, they control somewhere between 15 to 20%. So that's a major swing consideration. All right. What's your next case?
My next case is what happens if there's low turnout, especially among retail shareholders. In that case, all the other assumptions stay the same. We just take down the turnout assumptions for non-passive funds and retail shareholders. And in that case, only 45% actually vote for. So the vote would fail in that case if retail doesn't turn out. And that makes sense now, retrospectively, why Tesla is literally calling some people to ask if they have voted their shares yet and are encouraging people to vote.
Exactly. That makes a lot of sense, Michael. That makes a lot of sense. We have Omar and Jimmy on the board. Let's start with Jimmy for a second. Jimmy, have you pondered much about this issue at all?
Yes, I have. Can you hear me?
Okay, what are your thoughts?
I think these Glass-Lewis and others may not vote for Elon, but I believe that the other institutions will. It's in their incentive to. Elon has a lot of companies, including, of course, he has his own personal wealth. They will never be able to offer him a single financial product in the future if they vote against him. There are differences here. There's Glass-Lewis is voting against Larry Fink in his pay package right now, but that's for very different reasons. They don't offer financial products to Larry Fink, but these other financial institutions do for all these large companies who have very similar issues. Now, the size is not the issue. Larry Fink is asking for a $23 million pay package, and they vote against. Glass-Lewis has historically voted against these types of leaders across the board. JP Morgan, Mercedes, I mean, the list goes on and on. They're an activist group. They've written papers about why they think pay packages have gotten too big, so on and so forth. But many of the proxies like Fidelity, Vanguard, et cetera, they have financial institutional sales, prime brokers, and other things like that. It requires good relations with the chair or CEO of that company. They will only vote, and if you look historically speaking, they only vote against in cases where the CEO has very little skin in the game and they just don't feel comfortable with increasing the pay package significantly. But in the case where the person that they're voting against is also extraordinarily wealthy, that person will have a financial office of their own, a family office. Like Bill Gates, for example. They offer those people financial products. They expect their financial offices also to invest in their funds. I mean, it's a circular economy. So I do not think that they're going to vote against.
Okay, Jimmy, what do you think is the probability that proposal 4 passes versus fails?
I think it's 90% probable that it passes.
What do you think of Michael's analysis at the top?
It assumes a lot of factors without a lot of information. For example, that the assumed passive funds vote against and things like that. I mean, if you look at the history of these large passive funds, they do not typically vote against if the CEO has large skin in the game, like they're the founder. You know, MangoDB, Snowflake, all these other companies they have voted for.
Omar, how are you?
Hey, doing good.
Do you agree with what Jimmy said? So Michael says, and I agree with Michael, that passive index funds are more likely to go with Glass Lewis and ISS. Whereas Jimmy says, if you look at the history, that's not the case. They usually they vote for compensation of founders. And Jimmy, I have to ask you to produce. Do you have any sort of data?
Yeah, I could put up on top if you want. I mean,
Yeah, put it on top. Omar, what do you think?
Well, I disagree with some parts of Michael's analysis. Obviously, there's a lot of assumptions. One important point that's worth making is we actually need 51% to pass. So even in a scenario where we got 50.1%, the vote would fail. So that's one important thing to keep in mind. As I understand it, I could be mistaken, but that's my understanding. Secondly, the passive index funds, they have an incredible amount of voting power and an incredible amount of influence. And as more and more people have put money into passive index funds, this has been discussed quite a bit, the influence of these passive voting funds. So I think to say that, look, Glass Lewis and ISS said don't vote for it, so they're just going to go with that. 100% of all the passive index funds are going to vote no, is a little bit of an oversimplification. The reality is they have these sort of boards that really look into this and they really think about each vote. So it's going to be different between different index funds. I could even see a situation where some vote yes and some vote no. In some cases, they'll actually vote their shares in proportion to, something or the other. They'll vote some shares one way or another. Vanguard has been doing some trialing in certain funds where they actually ask the funds holders how they want to vote the shares, and then they vote the shares in proportion to that. Um, so it's not necessarily just that simple that they're all just going to vote no. Really, it's impossible to predict what's going to happen. You can run all these different scenarios and kind of wring your hands about it, but you know, it- we'll find out next week what happens, and until then, we can try and figure it out, but we'll never know for certainty.
If anybody has any studies about what index funds have done in the past, historically, how they voted, please share. Please request to speak. We would love to have that information on the board. Magic?
Hey, yeah. So in relation to that question of Glass Lewis and ISS, the main thing is I want, like, again, let's instead of hopes and dreams, let's put up some numbers and say how many times have institutions voted against what ISS and Glass Lewis have recommended, and then we can get there. And I would highly doubt that there's many instances of institutions voting against what ISS and Glass Lewis recommends. But again, let's find the data and let's get there. But again,
Yeah, I actually have some data on this, and I can share, no problem. I share with my patrons. I'm sure many people have seen it already. Maybe Michael has already seen it. Michael, have you seen this Harvard paper?
No, I actually have not.
Okay. Let me see if I can find it real quick. They do sway the votes, and it changes how much they sway changes by topic quite a bit. But the one thing I learned from this paper that I'm about to pop into the nest is SEC has a rule where institutional investors must share how they go about voting, and they must also share how they voted. So, or they can outsource to these proxy advisory firms. So, do you want to make the investment and hire the people and take the risk, do the research by yourself in-house, or do you want to outsource to proxy advisory firms, which obviously becomes a low-cost, lowest friction route to just outsource? That's something I didn't know, and I think it's material information here. The paper is now at the top of your screens. And I'll read the relevant section here. It's a long one. It touches on quite a few things. Here's the paragraph. Regulatory demand for proxy advisory firms. In 2003, the SEC began to require that registered institutional investors, including mutual funds and index funds, develop and disclose their proxy voting policies and disclose their votes on all proxy items. The rule was intended to create greater transparency into the voting process and to ensure that institutional investors act without conflict of interest. Furthermore, the SEC clarified that institutional investors could satisfy this obligation by relying on voting policies developed by an independent third-party agency such as a proxy advisor. The use of a proxy advisor firm has therefore become a cost-effective means of satisfying fiduciary and regulatory voting obligations for institutional investors. So there's a lot more information on that paper. I do recommend people read it. If you have any further information, any contrary information, please request to speak and share with the rest of us. Michael?
Actually, I did see that paper. I forgot that I did.
Yeah.
They do have some percentages, I think, there on how much they shift the vote. But it depends on what kind of vote it is, whether it's a say on pay vote or a board member. And it's also across all institutions. And we know that there might be a divide between what passive index funds do and what the rest of institutions do.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be a close call either way. As Omar also said, it's impossible to know how it's going to pan out. But if we assume the index funds vote most, if not all of their shares in accordance with Glass Lewis and ISS, and I know Omar has reservations around that. And then if we assume, or we know, CalPERS or, Leo Koguan or a bunch of others have announced that they're going to vote against board recommendation with this. If you account for them, Tesla has to get for proposal 4 almost 70% of the remaining votes. So that's a high bar. Okay. So if there's anyone in the audience that's voting in protest, thinking that the vote is going to pass anyway, that Elon's going to get his comp anyway, think twice. If you can change your vote, I think you should give that serious consideration. Magic.
Hey, so I think institutions. I mean, I think they're going to generally go with Glass Lewis ISS. I mean, we'll see what happens. I think just people need to realize that. I think there's this assumption that if the vote goes yes, the stock goes up. I mean, what if you vote yes and the stock doesn't go anywhere? So institutions have to be like, hey, I'm going to dilute shareholders just to keep them happy. That doesn't necessarily mean the stock's going to go up. So I think there's that element you got to understand is that as an institution, you're diluting share.
Magic, your connection is really bad. So I'm going to move on to Jimmy real quick because he posted a Financial Times article. This is from December 2023. It says shareholders raise heat on US companies over executive pay. Investors are rattling more US companies over executive pay, attacking bonuses and other changes to remuneration, while shying away from supplying highly politicized environmental and social measures. Dozens of US listed companies that proposed to change their pay plans struggled to win support from shareholders this year, according to research from Glass Lewis, a proxy advisor. These included 17 where pay proposals failed to receive a majority vote, more than doubling from 7 in 2022, and the highest in at least 5 years. Companies that received less than 75% support for bonus plans jumped to 159 this year from 112 in 2022, Glass Lewis said. Shareholders' increased vigilance over executive pay comes as they cut back support for resolutions on environmental and social matters in the face of criticism from politicians, even as those proposals have proliferated. The pay proposals that fail typically involve issuing new shares that dilute current investors. Jimmy, what's the relevant section here? Jimmy, what's the relevant section in this article? Jimmy?
Yeah, can you hear me? I've had some major issues. Okay, so if you look at
Yeah.
that article, the last sentence is this. Vanguard pointed to its 2023 voting report, which said the firm backed the vast majority of pay proposals supported by corporate management. I can find some of these ones, but I have to log into my account, and I don't have it on my phone right now.
Well, but that doesn't confirm. That doesn't negate what the rest of the article says. The rest of the article says
But
there's
the
an
article
increase.
goes through examples of them voting against, but the vast majority they vote for. It's very simple.
No, the article is saying that there's an increased scrutiny and against votes have increased. Vanguard is saying they voted vast majority of the pay proposals supported by corporate management.
Yeah, that's true.
This is not the level of support I'm looking for.
Bro,
Your claims.
it says in the last sentence they voted that vast majority of the time for, okay? You're now becoming a quibbler. Don't be a quibbler.
Kobas? Kubas, go ahead.
He was scared.
Okay. Yeah. All right, thank you, Jimmy. All right, Omar, I see you posted corporate Vanguard. I pinned it at the top. What's this about?
Well, this is their document where they outline their policy for voting on U.S. portfolio companies.
Yeah, somebody else pointed to me to this link. In this outline, is there anything that indicates they're going to vote for proposal 4?
Well, it's complicated. So, first off, the larger funds like Vanguard and BlackRock are not just saying, "Oh, what did Glass Lewis or ISS say?" They have actually a committee that studies these votes in details and tries to make a vote that aligns with their goals for their funds. So, like a smaller fund maybe I think would do it, but the larger ones, your Vanguards, your BlackRocks of the world, they are taking this into consideration. Obviously, the weight of these index funds, the Vanguard index funds, for example, they're so great. I mean, these are multi-trillion-dollar funds that they have an outsized impact, and they take it seriously. And they know that some people are saying that we should actually revoke voting rights from these passive funds because they gain control over the entire U.S. economy. So, they say, look, we take this very seriously. We want to vote the right way. We study each of these. And they said 4 pillars. The policy is organized into 4 pillars. Number 1, board composition and effectiveness. Vanguard seeks to ensure boards are independent, experienced, diverse, and capable. They emphasize majority independence for boards and key committees. They will vote against non-independent directors and overboard directors. Board oversight of strategy and risk. This pillar focuses on effective board governance of long-term strategy and risk. Vanguard evaluates proposals of mergers, acquisitions, and financial transactions based on valuation, strategic rationale, and governance of surviving entity. Executive pay. Vanguard assesses executive pay based on alignment of pay with performance, plan structure, and governance. They favor compensation linked to long-term performance and will vote against proposals that exhibit pay for performance misalignment or poor compensation governance. 4, shareholders' rights. Vanguard supports shareholders' rights proportional to ownership. They generally oppose anti-takeover measures and favor proposals that enhance shareholder rights, such as proxy access and elimination of dual-class stock structures. And then, so kind of interesting there. You can see definitely how some of these proposals might encourage them to vote no. On the other hand, I think it does kind of align with their pay for performance on the compensation structure. And I think you could make an argument that supporting, the original shareholder votes over the court could be good for shareholders' rights.
Yeah. I mean, so when you read that, that sounds very general. It sounds very general. It makes sense on the surface, right? But on the other hand, you have the court decision and you have the 2 proxy advisory firms. Like if you ask the proxy advisory firms, they're going to agree with everything you read. And what I learned is, I asked the other person to read it as well, and they read the same section. And what I took away from that section is it puts in context how the Culper CEO worded her words on the CNBC interview. She said something like, pay is not commensurate with performance. Michael?
Yeah, I mean, it's all good and nice what Vanguard says, how their policies are for voting, but the reality is they voted against it, the Elon compensation package, in 2018. And I mean, it's very hard to argue that anyone is going to actually flip their vote from 2018, from against to for.
Right. Let me ask you something. In 2018, what fund did Vanguard have that voted against?
Probably, they have a total stock market index
Right.
fund. They have other
Right.
passive funds that aren't just following the S&P 500.
Right.
And yeah, Tesla could have been part of other indices that weren't the S&P 500, but I don't remember what they were part of or not.
Thank you. Do you know how BlackRock voted in 2018?
They voted for.
Really?
Yeah, I can actually pin a Sawyer post to the.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Bill Bob Joe.
Yeah, I missed a few seconds of chat there, so sorry if I'm repeating something, but I think it's important to remember that index funds and institutions are not a monolith. And if you look at 2018, Vanguard voted against it, but BlackRock supported the compensation package. So I think you can't just mark all index funds as automatic no's.
Omar?
One other point that I want to make is it's tough to draw comparisons from history because this is in many ways an unprecedented vote. Looking at how Vanguard and BlackRock respond to your ordinary sort of mundane proposals from the hundreds of companies that are on the stock market and how they handle this situation, which is a very unique situation, may not be the same. I would probably expect Vanguard to vote no if they voted no before, and I would expect BlackRock to probably vote yes if they voted yes before. But again, this is a unique situation. Anything could really happen, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Vanguard vote either way or BlackRock vote either way. It's a very unique situation, and especially the larger passive index funds, they do actually, at their discretion, investigate these things and make decisions based on the situation. The other document that I put in the Spaces chat was from Vanguard, and they did mention that they're expanding voting choice in a number of funds. For example, their S&P 500 growth fund and a number of other funds where fund holders can actually vote through that. And to the extent that they've expanded that, again, it's not for all funds, but you could actually see more yes votes from Vanguard if the holders of the funds, such as the S&P 500 growth fund, are supportive of it. So that's another wrinkle in the situation as well.
Can you say that last sentence again?
That's another wrinkle in the situation as well.
Okay, the previous, like the one before that.
Vanguard is expanding voting choice for fund holders. So what I put a link in the Spaces chat. They have a number of funds they listed. This document's from just a few months ago. So, they're very aware of the risks that we're talking about, that these index funds have outsized influence. And more, they're actually letting the fund holders vote and then voting in proportion to what their fund holders say.
Uzi.
Hey, I found a Columbia Law Review analysis of the big three. And the takeaways basically claim that they don't really care about pay; they care more about governance structures. And they like compared to activist hedge fund managers, they're a lot more obviously passive. It's part of their name. And then as part of that, um, basically, yeah, they have more of a tendency to sit on the sideline, and they just don't like the historical analysis says they comment a lot less compared to smaller groups that are more active. So that's really
Thank
it.
you. Michael, so in your analysis, you had assumed passive funds to vote along with ISS and Glass Lewis. But we also know that BlackRock voted for the compensation plan 2018. Does that compel you to change your assumption on that?
So I did have a scenario where I talked about, the fact that Elon Musk recently followed the chief investment officer of BlackRock. I think Riedler is his name, and
Rick Reader. Yeah, I mean that's like tea leaving though.
that's true. So,
Right.
but
So I
if
think
they do vote for, the point is, if they do vote for, then in 3 out of the 4 scenarios that I came up with, um, the vote will pass. And the only one that it doesn't is if retail gets upset and revolts. And
okay.
so, what I would add, why did I assume 100% of passive funds voting against? Why did I assume BlackRock voted against, even if though they voted for in 2018? Because I think in 2018 they were holding Tesla probably in some of their active funds, and not in any of their passive funds. And they could actually split their vote. Their active funds could vote for, their passive funds could vote against.
Omar, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think he's right. But the other point I just want to make is I'm holding hundreds of thousands of dollars of Tesla shares going into this, and I think my family has several $1 million of Tesla shares that they bought, and we're holding them going into this. And I'm not really spending too much time figuring out how the vote's going to go. because I believe that even if the vote passes, that doesn't mean he gets to keep the plan. And even if the vote fails, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the world and he's going to leave and he's going to take the team and the company's just going to go down in flames. So,
Okay,
it's kind of.
let me address that real quick.
Go ahead.
I agree with you. It's not a binding vote. Okay. And it may not change the course position. At the same time, on the other hand, if it wasn't material, Tesla wouldn't be going to this extent. So it is clearly a material step. And if it does pass, then it really strengthens Tesla's appeal. And then the other thing, second part, I in no way think that in the off chance that the vote didn't pass, and then in the off chance on top of that Elon left, that Tesla engineers would leave the company or Tesla's technology would be taken away. I don't believe any of that stuff. I don't think that's likely scenario. Having said that, I do think there's a massive risk to the downside to Tesla as a company because Elon's execution is unmatched. And if that is not present, then execution would suffer greatly at Tesla. And it's at a very, very bad timing. There are more than 1,000 other companies that failed in the US alone. More than one. You can go on Wikipedia and look at the list. More than 1,000 other companies failed in the US alone in history. Hundreds of EV companies failed around the world in the last decade alone. The only one that succeeded to produce profitable, pure EVs is Tesla. And it's because of Elon. It's because of Elon's focus, execution, relentlessness. And if that leaves out the door, then I think it's very possible that Tesla can turn with time into one of the hundreds of companies that did fail. Michael.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think it's interesting because the percentage chance that the Texas vote passes is actually higher, in my opinion, than the Elon's compensation package, and that's because ISS recommended for the Texas reincorporation. So that's an interesting development, and if that passes, then I believe in Texas. Correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't quite done the full research on this one, but I think I saw other people say it that in Texas, um, they could split the shares into different voting tranches and get Elon to 25% control. And so I think he would be less likely to leave if the Texas vote passes, even if his compensation plan fails.
I don't see I don't know how likely it is that proposal 4 fails and proposal 3 succeeds, because my understanding is that the bar for proposal 3 is higher because every abstained vote counts as no. And the people who are voting no for proposal 4, Elon's comp, are very likely to vote no on Texas.
We could do the math. I can try and do the math and see what would happen if the passive funds vote for it and the different turnout assumptions. We could try to do that.
Okay, Uzi?
I mean, also proceeding like recent history though. In January, when the comp package got denied, the stock price plummeted, and so even though that's a bad thing, who bought the bottom? The bulls, and who sold out? Ross Gerber. So the people voting against the comp package.
Okay. Pennington?
What I found to be so interesting is over the last couple months, tens of thousands of people have been terminated from Tesla. But recently, some new job postings were added, and they were all within the AI and robotics team. So one would think that if Elon was going to leave and there's going to be an exodus from the AI team, that people would have been leaving and they wouldn't be hiring there. But they are. It's the only group where job listings have been added. So food for thought, but we have no idea what Elon or the board has planned next. But it doesn't seem as if it's going to be the Titanic in the event that this gets voted down.
Yeah, nobody in here claims that Tesla's employees or engineers will be running out the door. So you're making, I think you're kind of arguing against a different argument than what's being discussed here. Jimmy, I know people don't want to talk about this. Okay, I know, but there's a possibility
I'm
that this
adding
kind of...
some evidence. Just give me a second.
Okay, go ahead. Omar, what do you think about what I said?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said. And I wasn't trying to necessarily put words in your mouth and say that you're making this argument, but I just think it's a little too early to draw conclusions. Like I said, a yes vote doesn't mean we won. A no vote doesn't mean it's the end of the world. There's a number of different ways the scenario could play out, but ultimately, I believe that it's going to be immaterial long term, meaning it'll find itself worked out in one way or another. Maybe the vote passes and the judge dismisses the case. Maybe the vote fails and Elon leaves the company and then they have a special meeting and they make some deal to get him back. Maybe the vote fails, but then they pass some slightly lesser version of the compensation plan or something and that passes. Maybe he leaves the company and it flames out and dies. I think that is a possibility, but it's a sum of several probabilities, right? So it's the vote failing and then this and then that. And then, maybe it adds up to, I don't know, 5 to 10%. If the vote fails, that it ends up being a scenario where he leaves and the company's greatly reduced in value. So I think you're right that execution is extremely important. It's really sad to see with this vote coming up, so many Tesla shareholders actually coming out and saying, and a lot of people like, your Leo Koguans and your Cal Purs and your Fred Lamberts who are really going out and campaigning and saying people should vote no for this. And it's kind of sad to see.
Dude, I
And
don't think they realize, like, let's Fred Lambert, for example. I don't doubt the guy's intentions, that he means well, that he really cares about climate change and he wants the mission to succeed. I don't think he realizes what he's doing, the damage he's doing
yeah,
to the mission.
totally
Without
agree.
Elon, I think the probability of Tesla failing is higher than people think. And without Tesla, there is no vision on the robotaxis. Nobody else is working on vision on the robotaxis. And without vision on the robotaxis, you can't transition. You cannot transition the world system of energy without vision on the robotaxis. You're not going to be able to do it with LiDAR, and nobody else is working on vision only. And what happens without vision only robotaxis is hybrids take over. So I just don't think that he realizes what he's doing. Like, I actually listened. So they have these weekly podcasts and whatever, right? I listened to the last one, and he live admitted that he didn't know Mach-E was unprofitable. Like, that's the level of, like, I don't doubt his intentions, but that's the level of, and this is widespread. I'm not trying to pick on him. This is widespread. People aren't looking to the financial statements.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty spot on analysis. And, there's a lot of people who feel slighted by Elon in one way or another. I think a lot of the employees who got fired, guess what? They're going to vote on Elon's compensation package, right? They've been paid in Tesla
Exactly.
shares. So there's a lot of people who are pissed for one reason or another. I mean, people, the stock price has made people very irrational. People are very upset with Elon. They, oh, the stock price used to be twice as high. So clearly he's doing a terrible job. He's an idiot. He's very sort of underappreciated right now. And you could say maybe things got a little overhyped or overexcited at the top. People are like, "Oh my God, Elon, you're God." And now they're like, this guy's, the worst guy in the world. But in reality, I mean, he's pushing all of these industries that he's in forward. There might not be an EV industry if he got out of it. And I agree. I don't think people really realize what a dire and consequential situation this is. It's not necessarily, like I said, that, okay, if the vote fails, it's the end of the world. But, if there's even a chance that you could damage the future to this
Exactly.
extent, why play with fire like
Exactly.
that?
They're playing with fire just to look like they're making a difference, just to look like they're getting their voice heard. They're playing with fire. And let's do a quick back of the envelope calculation. 140 something thousand employees, they laid off about 10 to 20%. Let's say 20,000 employees. $100,000 per employee, including healthcare, all the benefits and everything per year. That's $2 billion that had to be saved because the sales aren't there because of high interest rates and all the other reasons that we talk about. The cash balance is 20 something billion dollars. You need $10 billion of minimum cash on Tesla's balance sheet. Every $1 billion savings counts right now. And the guy does not have any sort of seconds to worry about what this person is going to feel, what that person is going to feel. How can I make that feel better when I'm laying them off? It's not like that right now. Jimmy?
Yeah, I posted up on the top a very interesting report by State for State Street about their voting patterns. It's a very detailed report. And essentially it shows that State Street may not be one of the largest advisors, but I think it's fourth or fifth biggest, votes almost always for, 70% of the time. So yeah, it's another piece of evidence that Vanguard and others, they're under some influence, may or may not vote. One of the main differences, as I think many people have alluded to earlier, is that pass-through voting has grown for obvious reasons due to the change in tech. Fidelity and others are allowing that to happen now. So when you look at 2018 records for voting, the last package, that is unfair a bit because, of course, pass-through voting really didn't exist to an extent at those big firms, those big passive income firms. But again, from State Street, this is from 2023, you can see that they almost always voted yes for these packages and for other resolutions. Much more detailed than that sentence I have in the Financial Times, but look, at the end of the day, if SpaceX IPOs, they're going to want Elon's support on that, right? They're going to want to invest in that. And there are other firms that Elon could work with in the future. He's not an old man. He's still got time, a lot of time. So I really believe that the big firms will probably vote for. I see very little downside for them voting for, very little. Now, if they would vote against, there's a lot of downside for them. And I think that they understand that. Those who claim that Vanguard and Fidelity have their committees and they got their head of corporate governance and so forth, I think that's more of the dot the I's, cross the T's situation. I think that most of those decisions will come from their boss about what to vote for. I think that if their boss realizes what's good for them, the firm will vote yes. And at the end of the day, I can spend hours getting more and more evidence for you. But again, this is something I found pretty quickly. And can people see the link? I mean, I know it's a Google link, but it goes directly to that report. So if you could check that out and give some feedback, that'd be great. Thank you.
Michael?
That's well and good, but State Street voted against in 2018.
Again, differences today, and so did Fidelity and others. Things have changed. Also, Tesla wasn't worth as much as today, and Elon's also very rich compared to before. State Street and others, they get a healthy amount of respect for very rich people a lot of power and leverage. I'm pretty sick of this, to be honest. You're here because you're goody two-shoes telling the world that somehow Elon doesn't deserve it. And then I see that the thing got deleted in the top, so I don't really know how I can even share the evidence for people to look at it. You didn't even look at it. See, this is my problem. I'm going to be Yaman now. You didn't even look at it, and you're
How do
here
you know I don't
criticizing
look
it.
at it?
Because he said, oh, well, they voted against. No feedback about the actual report, no feedback about the statistics in the report. The whole thing makes me sick.
Thank you,
You
Jimmy.
make me sick.
Sammy, all right. Sammy, go ahead. All right. Okay. Omar, what do you think about Jimmy's point which is actually a point that we discussed before, that if an institution votes against Elon's comp, they may not be able to participate in, for example, SpaceX IPO, or be able to invest in Neuralink? What do you think about that point?
Well, they do have to publish their vote, and Elon is known to hold a grudge. But they can't, I mean, some firms have discretion in how they vote. They can vote for their own personal interests. But the larger passive index funds don't factor personal interest into their criteria like that. They have a fiduciary duty. They have to act only in the interest of the stakeholders, not of themselves. So I don't really think it'll be a major factor, but maybe in some cases it'll sway people. But really, this is an extremely complex situation, and it's an extremely unique situation. So we could discuss it all the way up to June 13th without sleeping, and we still wouldn't really know how it could go. So I don't really know. I mean, you can look at the 2018 vote, you can look at other statements they've made, you can try and guess what they're going to say, but until June 13th, it's just speculation.
Yeah. Michael.
So, just wanted to respond to Jimmy real quick. I want you to understand that I want this vote to pass. I literally voted tens of thousands of shares for Elon's compensation plan and for the reincorporation to Texas. So I really want it to pass. I do think it will pass, but it will probably pass narrowly, between 50 to 60% voting for. That is I feel pretty confident that it will fall in that range. And I think it's important to highlight how close this vote is going to be, because we need to discourage those people who are playing with fire, like Yaman said, from playing with fire and burning all of us. And we need to encourage people to reach out to their friends and family to get them to vote. We need to kind of encourage all of that. And that is the intention behind all the research that I'm doing on it and everything that I'm saying about it. So it's only to support the cause, not to spread FUD or anything like that.
Thank you, Michael. Well said. I hope that settled Jimmy's stomach. Bill about Joe.
Yeah, on the State Street point, 80% of State Street funds allow proxy voting choice. So, if you have the fund, you can opt in to vote your own proxies. So it's really, really hard to model these things out. Certain funds allow that, certain ones don't. And I lost my train of thought. Thanks.
All right. Okay, sounds like we kind of covered it all. We got some new information. I think it was important to remind us that BlackRock voted for the plan. BlackRock obviously has some active funds and some passive funds. iShares is their passive business that they acquired from Barclays after the Great Recession. But they do have active funds as well. So maybe they'll split it, and I think that would kind of seal the deal. But that's an assumption, obviously. I think Vanguard is a question. State Street is a question. All right. let's talk about something else. We can switch topics, I think, unless somebody else has other views or questions they want to ask.
What else is there?
Well, you tell me. You're the one who's like, I don't want to talk about this. Well, what do you want to talk about?
I don't know. Nothing's happening. No 12.4. I did get a Model 3 performance VIN, but yeah, has anything happened that's interesting? I haven't heard of
Yeah.
anything.
Michael.
I mean, this isn't Steve Jobs. This is Elon Musk and Tesla. This is history that we're living right here that people are going to talk about in decades. That moment that was a turning point for the company. The same way you hear stories about that Apple board vote back in the day. Like, this is going to be, a really pivotal moment in the history of the company that people talk about one way or another. So, yeah, hopefully people understand the significance and can look back when, the company's much larger in scale and say, yeah, I was one of those people who voted and helped save the company, even though a lot of people were campaigning really hard. I mean, there's a lot of people who hate this guy and want to take this away from him, and they are fighting very hard. So it is literally going to take every single person who actually understands the significance of this to stand up and, you know, save the company essentially.
Goodness, that is the evolution of AI.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Well, first I want to just comment quickly. I see Jimmy left the speaker board. He probably got embarrassed that he was a little mean and said untruthful things, but it's okay. I wanted to ask Billy Bob Joe, is there any way to know, can you like produce a list of the funds that allow pass-through voting or voting choice? Because maybe we could encourage people who hold those funds to actually go and try to pass through their vote.
Yeah, I could definitely look. And I think it's important to remember that like the vast majority of retail shareholders who own index funds are not going to participate in the proxy voting pass through if the fund allows that.
Right.
It's probably
Exactly.
extremely minuscule. But there's already someone doing great work on this. Another, Tesla activist, the Tesla or the Boomer Mama. I don't know her name exactly, but I think she is doing a great job educating people about these things. And you can read about most of it on her page. She outlines, how different investors who own the stock through different means are able to vote.
Okay, good. Mr. Anderson.
Can you hear me? Hello?
What's your question?
I have a question. Do you guys not see the connection between Biden, Delaware, and this lawsuit? It's pretty obvious to me. I mean, if this guy gets in again, no, it's going to be bad. Bad.
All right. Omar, do you want to comment on that?
I don't believe that there's a connection. I believe that the courts
Yeah.
are operating on the law.
Yeah. Okay. Anything on 12.4?
Not a word. I did ask a Tesla
Wow.
employee whether it said it had Smart Summon and Banish, and they said I can't disclose that. But that's not really any information. Although,
Yeah.
in my optimistic sense, I took it as a confirmation, but it's neither. So we'll see. Absolutely, no word on it. We didn't see a new point build roll out to employees, but they are also being much tighter on leaks. So maybe it is going out and we don't know it. Um, in any case, if it takes a long time to get major updates out, then it takes a longer time to solve autonomy. So it's a little bit disappointing to see, but again, I'll hold judgment until we get the update. If we get it and it's amazing, then I'll forgive them for making us wait an extra week.
Okay. Tech circuits.
So I saw the video of 12.4 and it looked interesting. But now I see a Reddit post that of someone having 12.4 in the early access thing. And I posted a screenshot and I said it was the worst build that they've ever had, constantly going over the double yellow line, which would explain the delay. But at the same time, I'm not 100% sure it's real and I'm kind of confused.
Omar, have you seen that video or the post?
Well, I think I've maybe heard people talk about it. I didn't read it myself, but if that person works there, they're probably not working there anymore. Um, i- Other people I've talked to have had 12.4 haven't really mentioned anything like that. Someone mentioned it was a little more hesitant, which new versions are, but it could be, some region specific issue or something. Obviously, when you're in the pre-release program, you're not supposed to comment on any issues you see. So it could just be somebody making it up. It could be an actual employee who probably got let go now. But obviously, I think if it was ready, they would have released it. So we can ascertain that there must still be issues that uh, make them feel that they don't want to release it. That should be pretty obvious to everybody.
Do you feel confident that we will see a 5 to 10x improvement based on what you've heard?
Well, I haven't heard anything about the 5 to 10x improvement specifically. People are under very tight NDA. They've started stamping the VIN on the screen in the release notes so people don't share them. So they're really tightening things up about this. I've heard people talk about the lack of nag and how great that is. That may be also kind of why they really want to make sure this is great before releasing it. But I'm kind of a 5 to 10x improvement seems kind of hard to believe, but we'll have to see what it actually does when I get it. Even if I think it was a 2x improvement, that would be huge. And I think obviously it's going to vary from place to place. Some places might see a greater than 10x improvement in miles per intervention if an issue that's common in that area is fixed. Another area might actually see more interventions if it introduces a new issue that's common in that area. So it's kind of an oversimplification to say there's one rate, but it seems a little hard to believe. We'll kind of have to see.
Thank you. Hope you get it early, Omar.
Okay. Omar, did you see NVIDIA's presentation, Jensen's presentation in Taiwan, talking about combining GPU with the CPU, causing 100x improvement in speed? And what does that mean for Tesla?
Well, I think it means that, the pace at which their systems are getting more powerful is just pretty incredible. It's really outpacing even what Moore's law expects. So it's generally a very good thing. Like FSD 12 is basically brought to you by NVIDIA. The huge compute cluster that they built essentially makes the techniques that power FSD 12 possible. if you look at the growth of compute before FSD 12, it was like flat by comparison. And they found that if you just kind of throw more compute at this, the system just keeps getting better and better the more you train it and the more data you have. So as the computers get more and more powerful, which they are going to at an increasing rate, you have a tremendous amount of capital being poured into NVIDIA. And that's going to result in them being able to invest more in designing more and more powerful chips, producing more of them. And FSD will get better for free. You don't need necessarily more engineers, you don't need smarter engineers. As compute gets faster, more efficient, and we buy more of it, the self-driving will just keep getting better and better. So plot that out, and you're sort of riding this wave of tech improvement and competition across the industry to deliver a product that is just getting better on its own, essentially. And that's pretty exciting, I think, not just for FSD, of course, but also for the robot and the capabilities that it needs.
Okay, great. Trying to see if there's anything else we got to talk about. Anything else on your mind?
No,
There
there
was a
hasn't been
big
much news, has
Cybertruck,
there?
big Cybertruck event in Austin, Texas today. If you guys aren't following Anwar Beck or the Tesla Austin Owners Club, check it out. There's gonna be a lot of pictures and really cool videos coming out of the Cybertruck event today in Austin. All right, that's it. Bill Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say if people want to start getting excited about the next conversation that's going to be had once this vote is over, it's, you know, the conversation is going to move to 8.8 and the robotaxi unveil. And I think that's going to be held at Austin. And so I would encourage people to go watch a YouTube video of a drone flyover of Giga Texas. You can see, you know, the Cybertrucks rolling off the production line. It's really cool. You can see the new extension they're building, this huge glass, you know, addition that's going to house a massive data center, apparently. And you know, some of the other construction going on speaks to that. They're doubling the amount of electricity that's going to the building. It's already the second largest building in the world. So imagine, you know, how much power it has already, and they need to double it to run this supercomputer. They're digging a tunnel, so the cars are going to come off the production line and go under a tunnel. And so, you know, you can kind of see all this coming together by August 8th and just kind of get a feel for how cool that event is going to be.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right. Markets are looking positive in Sunday night futures, slightly up, or slightly up. And there's going to be a lot of news around GME tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
And
Do you see that thing?
yeah, I don't want to talk about it. It's ridiculous. But that's, I mean, you can mention it. Go ahead.
Well, it looks like Roaring Kitty has a $180 million stake in both equity holdings and options. I think he had a call option expiring in 19 days with a $21 strike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, $7 billion market cap, GameStop. And he owns about $200 million of it in shares and calls. And, you know, whoever else. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting week for GME.
I
Michael?
mean, regulators are probably not going to be happy about this. I feel like he could be getting
I mean, what are
himself
they
in
going to
trouble.
do? What are
I mean,
gonna
they
do?
were
He
already
has-
kind of on his ass the first time, you know?
But what can they do? I mean, the guys just, I mean, they can investigate, I guess. Michael?
Yeah, I actually invested in GME that first time around a few months before a couple months before it skyrocketed, and I made a six-figure profit and was able to triple my Tesla shares. That was really great. And in one of my accounts, and that was really great. So, but what I wanted to say was that it's interesting that it's happening again. And back then, it kind of made sense to me why it might skyrocket. I don't see the reasons today, so I wonder why he's putting tens of millions of dollars in call options. It seems insane.
Hundreds. So what was the reason that it could skyrocket before?
Because there was more short interest than there was shares in existence.
Okay, got it. Hey, Michael, do you want to give us an update on production deliveries? Anything on your end that kind of changed in the last few days?
No, the latest I have as of now, I only get updates once a week. The latest I have right now is what I posted a couple days ago, which was my expectation that
Yeah.
they would both production and deliveries would be about around 425,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The 0.99% financing for Model Y in the US is gone. Omar, do you think it's going to come back in June?
Maybe next quarter.
Okay. And the Tesla info page was showing a potential increase in Model S and X inventories. What do you think about that, Omar?
Why would anyone want to buy an S and X when there's a Cybertruck?
Yeah. Michael?
I think a lot of that spike in the SNX inventories on that page is because Tesla listed a bunch of demo vehicles, especially Model S and X, for sale, and they all have slight discounts, and they're all different discounts. And the way that page works is that it's showing you one listing, but it could actually represent multiple cars if those multiple cars have the same price, configuration, and location combination. So if you post a bunch of demo vehicles, it will really spike up that chart if those demo vehicles have
Right.
slightly different prices.
But those Model S and X lines were increasing even coming into this last couple of days, a surge, right?
That's true.
And I don't look for the demo cars. I didn't see that many demo cars. There's some though. You're right. So just an
There's a lot on
indication.
the East Coast. I'm on
I
the
see.
East Coast, and I looked, and there was quite a few.
I see. Okay.
Those inventory
Alright.
trackers are, of course, not 100% reliable.
Not 100%. You're right. Michael, do you think the fine? Go ahead.
Yeah, the financing is interesting because I said a couple days ago, I think Juniper is coming this year. And what I learned recently is that Model 3 actually had a financing deal as well last year. It was only in the UK, I think, and maybe one other country. And were doing that deal just before the Highland was announced. They were doing it in like September or some like summer or something like that.
Okay. Maybe we can dig into that a little bit more tomorrow. I don't know how much I want to talk about Juniper because no obvious reasons. All right, let's end it here. Thank you very much, everybody. And I will talk to you all tomorrow. Take care. Good night.